Heterodox Views of Money and Modern Monetary Theory, MMT, by Phil Armstrong. Alternative Views of Money. Carl Menger articulated his version of the good story in 1892. His ontology was deeply rooted in the presupposition that the individual enters the world equipped with rights to the free disposal of his property and the pursuit of his economic self-interest, and that these rights are anterior to and independent of any service that he may render. Menger's theorizing was based on the subjective goal-directed actions of individual agents, a view that continues to characterize the Austrian approach to economic theory, and anti-empiricist deductivism. Given the a priori truth of his presuppositions and his impeccably logical deductive reasoning, the need for empirical testing disappears. The good story is given a green light. For Menger, men have been led with increasing knowledge of their individual interests, each by his own economic interests, without convention, without legal compulsion, nay, even without any regard to the common interest, to exchange goods destined for exchange, their wares, for other goods equally destined for exchange, but more saleable. He develops his argument further with, putting aside assumptions which are historically unsound, we can only come fully to understand the origin of money by learning to view the establishment of the social procedure with which we are dealing as the spontaneous outcome, the unpremeditated resultant of particular individual efforts of the members of a society who have little by little worked their way to a discrimination of the different degrees of salableness in commodities. However, for Ingham, money is logically anterior and historically prior to the market. I like his way of developing the discussion. In the first place, without making a number of implausible assumptions, it is difficult to envisage that an agreed money of account could emerge from myriad bilateral barter exchange ratios, as the Mengerian commodity theory implies. How could discrete barter exchange of, say, 3 chickens to 1 duck, or 6 ducks to 1 chicken, and so on, produce a universally recognized unit of account? The conventional answer that a duck standard would emerge spontaneously involves a circular argument. A single duck standard cannot be the equilibrium price of ducks established by supply and demand because, in the absence of a money of account, ducks would continue to have a range of unstable exchange ratios. As opposed to discrete truck and barter, which produces myriad bilateral exchange ratios, a true market, which produces a single price for ducks, requires first and foremost a stable unit of account. In contrast to the neoclassical theory, which finds its roots in the optimizing behavior of individuals, the state theory contends that the origins of money are rooted in the development of power and inequality. Traditional tribal societies were essentially egalitarian and had no need for money. According to Polanyi, they were based upon reciprocity, redistribution, and householding. However, with the development of inequality, a raison d'etre for money emerged. Henry finds the essential origins of money to lie in power and inequality rather than exchange. Those who see money as a social relationship stress the significance of money as a unit of account, in which obligations are both created and extinguished. Money, then, represents a relation between those who claim these obligations and those who must service those claims. He goes on to suggest that the role of exchange in the genesis of money is of minor significance, especially since the existence of markets is in no way a necessary condition for the evolution of money. Money's role as a medium of exchange is downplayed, while its role as a unit of account is stressed. In order to find alternative theories which may provide better explanations of money's origins and greater empirical support, we may look towards state and credit theories. In terms of the state theory of money, the significance of George Friedrich Knapp's seminal work, The State Theory of Money, needs to be stressed. Knapp's exposition is difficult to follow as he creates his own highly complex vocabulary and uses it extensively during his explanations. However, it is certainly a book worthy of a great deal of attention. For Knapp, it is the state that decides on the unit of account and the money things that are to be used in settlement of debts denominated in this unit. Initially, the unit of account may be a weight of precious metal of given fineness. However, the state may choose to change the unit to a different metal by decree. Thus, the choice of unit is in the hands of the state rather than springing from a process involving individuals searching for the most efficient way of reducing the costs of barter. If the state decided that a different metal was to be used as a standard of value, then it held the power to change the unit of account. If the state declares silver to be the material for payment instead of copper, the relative amount of existing debts remains unaltered. The state controls the transition. The two epochs are separated from one another by the moment in which the state declares that payments shall no longer be made by weighing out copper, but by weighing out silver. When the state changes the monetary standard by decree, the original standard becomes an abstract standard. In this case, the pound of copper becomes a purely abstract unit, and debts denominated in pounds of copper would now have to be paid in weights of silver as determined by the state. The state therefore treats the older debts as if the unit of value, a pound of copper, were only a name by the use of which the relative amount of the debt was indicated, and which does not mean in reality copper was to be delivered. The state reserves to itself the right to order, emphasis added, that a pound of copper should now mean that a given weight of silver was to be paid. The state's authority remains critical, and it is this that allows continuity of commerce given the change of monetary standard. If the state alters the means of payment, it lays down a rule for the conversion of the one into the other. The new means of payment must therefore refer back to the old one. It is only this reference that makes it possible to carry on business in the new means of payment, because at the moment of change care must be taken that the old debts should not lapse, but be able to be discharged. Knapp analyzes in considerable detail the process of monetary development from the starting point of a monetary unit expressed as a weight of metal of given fineness. The use of stamped coins, whose weight determines value, is seen as a later development. A further stage was reached when the coins were given a nominal value by the authorities, not based upon weight or precious metal content. When legal ordinances give the name to the unit of value, as mark, franc, or ruble, and define it by reference to the earlier unit, there is nothing to prevent us from giving to the morphic means of payment, payments whose specific form is declared by law, a validity not on weight, but on fiat. A proclamation is made that piece of such and such a description shall be valid as so many units of value. Once the unit is chosen, it may continue to be defined historically as a particular weight of metal of given fineness. However, over time, its nominal value would change in relation to the metal which underpinned its original definition. The state has the power to choose the money things, that is, what it may be used to settle debts in the designated unit of account. Validity of proclamation is not bound to any material. It can occur with the most precious or basest of metals, and in all cases where payments are not compensatory, weighing at the time of payment to establish validity, that is, in all modern monetary systems. It is the state that makes the rules. Knapp specifies the first as coins, minutely described, are made from a given metal with a given absolute content. This is the mint standard. Secondly, he continues, each of these coins must be worth so many units of value. The unit of value is either that previously existing or it is newly specified, and in this case it is historically defined with reference to the previous unit of value. The key point is the dominant role of the state in each of the stages. The state decides the timings, not individuals, maximizing expected utility. The state is not a late arrival on the scene, hijacking a monetary system, which is progressing efficiently driven by optimizing incentives for its own purposes. Rather, it always directs the process, for good or ill. In modern monetary systems, proclamation is always supreme. Ancient authorities would use their power to move resources from the private sector to themselves. Control of the monetary system provided a highly effective means for this aim to be achieved. From this perspective, taxation serves not to fund spending as is mistakenly believed by most economists and nearly all the population, but to create a demand for the currency and to reduce the spending capacity of the private sector. This will allow the state room to spend without inflation. A stylized story based upon the use of stamped metal might go as follows. A ruler might decide what she or he desired, for example, palaces, amphitheaters, and an army of conquest. She or he could utilize their monopoly power over the monetary system to obtain what they desired. They would first define the unit of account, and then decide upon the money things acceptable in payments of debts denominated in this unit, say, stamped metal discs, clearly marked with her or his head. The disc may contain precious metal. This precious metal content, if any, would be decided upon by the state, the mint standard. The use of precious metal may help prevent counterfeiting and raise the prestige of the issuer, but the intrinsic value of the coins provided only a floor value for the currency. The nominal value would be higher and determined by decree. She or he then imposed a tax on her or his subjects, denominated in its chosen standard, payable by the surrender of the stamped discs. The ruler decided the nominal value of the coins and how many each person must pay to satisfy their tax bill. This process gave the coins value. They were tokens showing the holder had a credit on the state. They were really tax credits. The ruler could now spend these tokens on whatever she or he wished, as long as it was available in her or his own domain, or monetary space. The private sector suppliers of goods accepted the tokens, not because they were made of precious metal, but rather because the population needed them to pay taxes. The rulers then paid their soldiers with these stamped metal discs, and the soldiers, in turn, were able to go to the villages and buy whatever they wished, provided, of course, it was available. The populace sold the soldiers real goods to obtain the discs to meet tax liabilities. Clearly, the empress or emperor had to spend before she or he could collect. A private agent minting discs with the ruler's head on without her or his permission would soon be put to the sword. It may appear that the ruler needed to tax before spending, but this is an illusion. So the state's ability to impose and collect taxes enables it to act as a currency issuer within its sovereign monetary space and transfer resources from the private sector to itself. The ultimate value of a tax-driven currency is determined by the amount of effort required by the issuer in order to obtain it. Viewed from another perspective, the state as the monopoly issuer of that which is required to pay taxes has the power to determine its value. In other words, the price level is necessarily a function of the prices paid by the state, a proposition to which we will return later when we analyze the insights provided by modern monetary theory, MMT. The significance of the power of the state is noted succinctly in by Knapp. Within a state, the validity of the kinds of money is not a trade phenomenon, but rests on authority. However, what if the state wishes to obtain goods and services from outside this space, from a foreign country? Clearly, it cannot levy a tax on foreign independent nations, so it becomes a currency user with respect to that country's currency. It must obtain that nation's currency to make the purchase or find a foreign producer prepared to accept its own currency. The amount of foreign currency that may be obtained for each unit of domestic currency is not subject to the control of the authorities. Rather, it is the result of action of buyers and sellers on the foreign exchange market or bourse. In international trade, the validity reaches to the frontier but does not pass it. Foreign coins have no validity in our country, nor our coins abroad. The value of foreign coins expressed in the required valuata, definitive money accepted in payments to the state, is decided by competition on the bourse, not by authoritative act. On the bourse itself, there is no authority controlling intervaluata relations. Obtaining foreign currency at an exchange rate determined by the bourse will involve, directly or indirectly, the export of real goods and services. In the first case, goods and services can be sold by the home government to pay for the imports it desires. Alternatively, it can pay for imports with its own currency, provided foreigners are prepared to accept its currency as a means to buy goods and services in the future. In this case, future exports from the home country will be necessary, or at least the realistic future prospect of them. It is clear here that imports are a real gain and exports are a real cost. In an ideal world, the home country would find willing foreign sellers who were prepared to simply save in its currency. It could then avoid the need to actually sell goods and services, well, for at least as long as the foreign country was prepared to export real goods and services and accept only debt in return. This situation is more than vaguely reminiscent of the USA and its relationship with China. Before considering the evidence supporting the state theory of money, we might examine the credit theory of money. The two approaches are complementary and together provide powerful insights absent from the neoclassical story. Once the state has named the unit of account, then private sector agents may issue their own money denominated in that unit of account. We might focus our attention on the work of Alfred Mitchell Innes and his two famous articles from the Banking Law Journal, What is Money in 1913 and The Credit Theory of Money in 1914. For Innes, the nature of money is founded upon the credit and debt relation and not as a development of barter. He states, a first-class credit is the most valuable kind of property. Having no corporeal existence, it has no weight and takes no room. It can easily be transferred, often without any formality whatever. Innes follows up with a powerful statement. Credit is the purchasing power so often mentioned in economic works as being one of the principal attributes of money, and, as I try to show, credit and credit alone is money. Innes had already clarified the meaning of credit. It is here necessary to explain the primitive and the only true commercial or economic meaning of the word credit. It is simply the correlative of debt. What A owes to B is A's debt to B, and B's credit on A. A is B's debtor, and B is A's creditor. B is A's creditor. The words credit and debt express a legal relationship between two parties, and they express the same legal relationship seen from two opposite sides. A will speak of this relationship as a debt, while B will speak of it as a credit. He then explained the relationship between credit and debt. Whether the word credit or debt is used, the thing spoken of is precisely the same in both cases, the one or the other word being used according as the situation is being looked at from the point of view of the creditor or of the debtor. Money, then, is credit and nothing but credit. A's money is B's debt to him, and when B pays his debt, A's money disappears. This is the whole theory of money. Innes discussed the nature of state money as credit. Every time a coin or certificate is issued, a credit on the public treasury is opened, a public debt incurred. Innes recognized that a debt to the state or tax liability can be paid by the return of the government's own debt instrument. In other words, there exists the right of the holder of the credit, the creditor, to hand back to the issuer of the debt, the debtor, the latter's acknowledgement or obligation, when the former becomes debtor and the latter creditor. Thus, a private sector individual can settle his tax liability by returning state debt to the government. The evidence in support of state and credit theories is wide-ranging and comprehensive. Impressive work has been done by Ingham and notably by Grierson, the famous numismatist. A thorough examination of corroboratory work is well beyond the scope of this paper. For this reason, I will rely heavily on Ray et al. This work provided a superb summary and critique of Innes' work and a wide-ranging survey of evidence concerning the development of money. Ray invited various specialist scholars to contribute to the volume. We might consider the case of Egypt. John Henry concludes, Egypt was not a monetary economy. Production was not undertaken to make money, but it certainly had money, and money was not a medium of exchange, but a social relationship. It was bound up with the transition from egalitarian to class society. He continues, the ruling class surrounding the semi-divine king levied non-reciprocal obligations, taxes, on the underlying population. These taxes had to be accounted for, and a measure had to be developed to allow a reasonably systematic form of bookkeeping to maintain records of obligations and the extinguishing of those obligations. In Egypt, this unit of account was the daben, and it is important to note that the daben was an arbitrary standard that rested on a particular weight, and this weight remained the same regardless of whether it referred to grain, copper, or silver. Money has no value in and of itself. It is not the thing that matters, but the ability of one section of the population to impose its standard on the majority, and the institutions through which that majority accepts the will of the minority. Money, then, is a unit of account, represents the class relations that developed in Egypt and elsewhere, and class relations are social relations. A. Mitchell Innes' theoretical account, developed nearly a century ago and long ignored by economists, is in accord with the historical facts of the development of money in Egypt. We might also consider the case of Mesopotamia. Hudson contends that, in general, the power to create money and expand the credit supply historically has tended to be in the hands of public bodies. Ever since its Bronze Age inception, money's power has been established by the public sector's willingness to accept it in payment for public fees and taxes. He goes on to conclude, in the specific case of ancient Mesopotamia, rather than originating with private individuals, trucking and bartering, money was created as a medium to denominate and pay obligations to the large public institutions. The Mesopotamian breakthrough lay in creating a system of price equivalencies that gave a sense of proportion. The value of dimension was provided by the accounting formalities that enabled temples and palaces to coordinate their internal resource flows and dealings with the rest of the economy. Thirdly, we might consider ancient Greece. According to Keynes, the Solonic reform of the Athenian currency in the 6th century BC was an exercise of the chartalist prerogative, which was contemporary with, but in no way dependent upon, the existence of coined money. It was just a change of standard. The evidence supports the contention that money is always credit and should be analyzed as a development from the credit-debt relationship, and that the state has a critical role in the introduction and use of money. Examination of ancient empires confirms this. Even today, states and would-be states are issuing or intending to use their own currency. ISIS has recently announced plans to introduce its own currency. This, in a sense, is an affirmation of its view of itself as a state. ISIS said that it would reinstate an ancient Islamic dinar currency using gold and silver coins. There is a modern form of the dinar still in use in some countries, but these use fewer precious metals for coins. ISIS's announcement did not state when the currency would come into circulation. The state decides upon the unit of account and is able to issue its own debt or tax credits denominated in this unit. Private sector agents can then issue their own debt denominated in this unit in return for goods and services. The holder of this private sector debt possesses a credit on the issuer which, if transferable in settlement of his own debts, effectively becomes money. Over the centuries, despite the primary significance of the state in the introduction and control of the monetary system, there have been many notable attempts by groups of private sector agents to subvert the power of the state. One of the most famous and successful was the Italian exchange bankers' use of their own currency. The system they used involved their own unit of account, the écu de marque, and their own money things, bills of exchange. They developed an international money system which enabled them to significantly enrich themselves. The system was based on the broad acceptance of bills of exchange within the sphere of influence of the exchange bankers. For example, an Italian merchant could buy a bill of exchange from an exchange banker in local currency and use it to settle a debt in, say, the Netherlands. The Dutch seller would receive local currency in return for the bill of exchange from another exchange banker operating in the network. The exchange bankers as group would hold large quantities of mutual credits and debts denominated in their unit of account, which required to be settled, usually periodically, at trade fairs. Exchange bankers received fees and commissions, but the fact that transactions were carried out between them in their own private money, the écu de marque, was critical. The exchange bankers could convene as a group and agree upon the conto, a schedule of rates of exchange between the various sovereign monies and the écu de marque. In essence, their power to set these rates of exchange to their own advantage enabled them to increase their wealth both individually and as a group relative to the rest of the community. An excellent and highly entertaining summary of the nature activities of the exchange bankers is found in Money, the Unauthorized Biography by Martin, 2013. Private Money and Public Currencies, a highly impressive feat of scholarship, provides a magisterial study of all aspects of nature of exchange bankers. Recently, several cryptocurrencies have emerged as potential rivals to state money. The most well-known of these is Bitcoin. The advocates of the use of Bitcoin see it as providing several advantages which are particularly appealing to libertarian groups with a profound mistrust of government. Because the currency is decentralized, you own it. No central authority has control, and so a bank can't take it away from you. For those who find their trust in the traditional banking system unraveling, that's a big benefit. CoinDesk, 2014. We might consider the question of whether Bitcoin is really money. However, this would lead to the problem of what we mean by really money. At this stage, we may be better advised to say that it is highly debatable whether Bitcoin can replace an existing state currency. It may be possible to use it as a money thing, but it is not a true unit of account. As pointed out by The Economist, volatile values could prevent Bitcoin from ever establishing itself as a medium of account. Even the few retailers who accept Bitcoin use other currencies as their principal accounting unit. Prices are given in a prominent currency, US dollars for instance, and the Bitcoin price fluctuates automatically with changes in the crypto money's exchange rate. Similarly, most Bitcoin owners work in jobs with wages paid in traditional currencies. So long as Bitcoin buyers and sellers think in euros or dollars, it will fall short of money status. The Economist, 2014. The complementarity of state and credit theories is strong. While there is no evidence that Innes was familiar with the work of Knapp, the similarities are remarkable. For Ray, Innes offered an unusually insightful analysis of money and credit. He not only provided the clearest exposition of the nature of credit, but he also anticipated Knapp's state money approach. Once the state has decided upon the unit of account, then most transactions that do not involve the government take place on the basis of credits and debits, that is, in terms of privately issued money things. After examining the evidence, it seems that we can have more confidence, at least tentatively, in the historical accuracy of credit and state theories of money, and unless we are immersed in free market ethics, we can disregard the good story. State and credit theories of money should not be seen as mutually exclusive. Far from it. Together, they provide a coherent framework which is extremely valuable for economists seeking to understand both the history and the nature of money. The state and credit theories of money allow us to understand the core reality of the monetary system. They tell us that the state is at the root of money, and in its essential nature, money is always transferable credit. Starting from their ethics, the neoclassical economists deduced a history of money. Despite this approach generating a good story, it had no empirical confirmation. In reality, the development of money goes hand in hand with the actions of the state. The state and credit theories of money, in contrast to their neoclassical rivals, receive significant support from the evidence. Thus, it seems logical to build a model of a monetary economy which explicitly takes account of the role of the state and the essential nature of money as following from the debt-credit relationship. Rather than considering money as a commodity which improves the efficiency of exchange, money becomes an intrinsic part of the operation of the system. Money is no longer a veil, no longer neutral, in the short run or long run. It seems clear that we need an approach within which credit and state theories of money underpin a model of the core reality of a monetary system, where a state issues its own fiat currency under floating exchange rates. Such a model is applicable to most of the world's contemporary national monetary systems, including the USA, UK, and Japan, but excluding the euro-using countries. MMT provides such a model, well rooted in these state and credit approaches.